So this is the media clip for assessment in special education. This is the final project by Lori Smith. Um, the first question was define least restrictive environment and discuss this concept as it relates to models of delivery for special services. So this principle is written into the student's IEP because the least restrictive environment guides a child's education. The least restrictive environment might look different for individual students depending on what their strengths or weaknesses are. Any placement outside of the general education classroom where students learn together with a general education classroom teacher has to be justified by the student's individual disability or their related needs. So, since the placement options are fluid, students might receive some services in one environment, such as the general education classroom, and other services in a different environment, such as the resource room or a SPED classroom with a SPED teacher or a paraeducator. And that's otherwise known as pull-out times. So the placements can change as students progress or their needs either develop or diminish. For some students, the general education classroom is not necessarily the least restrictive setting, and you have to consider the student's unique goals, needs, and you have to take into account the parent and student preferences for this, the academic and behavioral functions and the social emotional benefits of it, the effect on peers, whether it's favorable or unfavorable, and the balance of the delivery of an appropriate education that results with the progress and being educated alongside students with disabilities, and also how accommodations or modifications will actually support the student. So any placement outside of the general education classroom has to be justified for the individual's needs. So the general, the least restrictive environment is not necessarily a place, but a guiding principle for the IEP. And that should be like I have written here that it includes school, the bus, gosh, back, the bus, classrooms, and extracurricular activities. Sorry, this is not my forte of work here, so I apologize for that. The placement decisions and the factors for the least restrictive environment. So when students are working alongside peers in the classroom, it might require one-on-one assistance, and it might require assistive technologies or tools, and that can be either high-tech or low-tech. So some of the high-tech might be the assistive technology like the communication device that a student might need. Low key or low tech, I'm sorry, would be more like incentive charts or preferential seating. So those types of things. For the next part, it's why is the assessment process described as a cycle, and what are the components of the special education assessment process? So for the first question, why is it referred to as a cycle? It's referred to as a cycle because it is it rotates. It keeps on going. It's like if you give a mouse a cookie book. It's a circle book. It continuously loops. Um, so and it updates or um, how whatever the student's needs are, it updates or changes as necessary. So it repeats itself. We start out with extra support in the classroom. If we notice that there's some issue with academics or motor skills, something's happening that's showing that we might need to make some accommodations. So we might make some accommodations in the classroom for that student. Again, maybe preferential seating or pencil grips or those types of things. Um, Slowing down the instruction, that type of thing. Then always in touch with parents, always parental communication, making sure that parents know that we're seeing something that um, is maybe out of the norm for their student, that they're having difficulties or struggles in certain areas um, that might need to be addressed. When all of the extra support areas are failing and documentation has been made, proper documentation has been made, then referrals may need to happen. But that is the referral. We have to be very careful about that. Backing up to parent communication, I did want to add that it's important to ask parents for the assistance from home. It's important to um, make sure that they know about the obstacles that their student is facing in the classroom, and compare with them and tell them what has been um, done and what's working and what's not working. So back to referral. I kind of jumped fast there. Um, this is when, like I said, that parents and professionals have tried all other means and methods to help the student through extra support, and it's not really getting the progress that um, we would like to see. So parent rights are given at the time of the referral, and consent is asked for before that can go any farther. So that's when parents or guardians give the authorization for the evaluation, and that has to be done before anything can progress with the student. So um, there's a window of time for the referral to the evaluation, and I believe that's 60 school days after the consent is given, parental consent is given. Then there's the evaluation process. Um, this is the variety of assessments and tools and strategies that show that the student either does or does not meet the eligibility for special education. The evaluation's done by a qualified professional, and it could include like an IQ test, um, achievement test, and that's going to assess a student's academic knowledge and skills within a specific area. Um, then we're on to the eligibility. Now, a report has to be provided to the parents after the evaluation is conducted. They need to have all of the information about um, about what happened within the evaluation. If the student is eligible for special education, then parental consent is then again obtained, and an IEP um, is developed. The individualized education program team is assembled, and it's developed and implemented with written goals and objectives. Um, Then it's the services. Uh, what you'll decide what the services will be, decide what the least restrictive environment determination is. Um, if students are not eligible, then other means of intervention plans can be developed at that point. Um, so then services are then provided as written in the IEP, and progress monitoring is done through documentation, observation, um, parental interviews, those types of things. And then the review piece of the IEP is evaluated annually, but it can also be reevaluated as needed. So it's important to know what worked, what didn't work. Does a student still need assistance? Maybe they can be dismissed. So those things are um, looked at. Every 3 years, a thorough review of the IEP is done. Encouraged family participation. And the question was, describe at least 5 strategies a professional can use to encourage family participation in special education assessment process. So my number one part of this is communication. I believe that that's the key to um, success for students and families. Making sure that the parents understand the special education process, explaining the process in terms that the family can understand, and if an interpreter or mediator is needed, then that could be offered as well. Um, this process is oftentimes confusing, and parents sometimes say, "Well, I don't know what to do, so we'll just leave it in your hands." But they need to be encouraged and invited and facilitated, making sure all their questions are answered. Want to make sure that we offer the right amount of support for families. Making sure that we describe all the steps. For the assessment, we want to interview the student. We want to include the student everywhere we can. We want to make sure that we address all their concerns and give them the opportunity to help set up those goals for the student and the student for themselves as well. We might even offer resources to the family that would be beneficial, such as family service and guidance, and just different food banks, different resources that they might need for that. We want to be flexible with our schedules and meeting times and meeting places. We want to accommodate the family, making sure that, for instance, if a family member is disabled, we certainly don't want to have the IEP meeting in the farthest room from the front door. So those things need to be taken into consideration. The derived scores. This question was compare and contrast 3 types of derived scores: percentile ranks, standard scores, and Stanines. Tell how these scores are related to one another and to the normal distribution, and a sketch may be included. This scoring and and statistics is not my favorite thing, but it is part of the process. So I wrote the parts of this. So the percentile ranks is the percentage distance students fall below a score. Okay, kind of easily summed up. Standard scores is the distance from mean or an average of a group. So that kind of sums that up. Now, Stanine scores were a little bit tricky for me, so I wrote what I know but I did go ahead and include the sketch on this page, and this made more sense to me when I saw this, and I went, okay, this makes sense. So 1 to 3 is below average, 4 to 6 is average, and 7 to 9